Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Welcome, everybody, to the Land to Lots podcast. Carter Froelich here. And today's topic is going to be common errors that we find with development impact fees. I know this is everybody's favorite topic, development impact fees. As we represent private sector only, we're always working to either reduce development impact fees in the case of home builders associations, or if we're working for large master plan developers, oftentimes we're looking at potentially going back to the jurisdiction and increasing development impact fees as it relates to providing infrastructure for that particular master plan community. So it really depends on who's paying us. But as a little background, I should give a little history lesson on how we got involved in development impact fees in the first place. But when we started first doing some of the first community facilities districts in the state of California in the mid-1980s, we were financing a lot of the big regional infrastructure for the master plan communities, primarily in Southern California. And because we were going in and building this large regional infrastructure, because the jurisdictions were charging for some of this like type infrastructure through development impact fees, we had to make sure that our developer clients and or homeowners weren't, in essence, getting charged twice for the same infrastructure, once through the community facilities district and a second time through the development impact fee. I should also mention that we were all working with the accounting firm of Kenneth Leventhal, and I'm still a CPA, and being the good CPA that we are, when we got these development impact fee studies from the jurisdiction, we didn't really know what to do with them. So we thought, why don't we do an audit? We'll kind of treat this as if we're performing a financial audit of a public company, and let's just go tick and tie all their numbers. So not only did we get the various impact fee studies that were done by the jurisdiction and the supporting documentation, but we also pulled the city's CAFRA, their comprehensive annual financial reports. We sat all the information before us and we started digging into it and looking and reading and trying to understand the methodology, the infrastructure that was involved in the development impact fee, and how the jurisdictional consultants were coming up with these impact fees. And being the good consultants, and because we loved our 10 keys, and here again, I'm dating myself a little bit, guys, we had actual 10 keys. no computers. They were just coming out, and we would add up all of these columns, and we said, God, this is interesting. This column doesn't even add up. And if we add up the column, we come up with a much lower number than what the engineers had come up with. And if we run it through the process and the methodology that the engineers have come up with and the consultants, we end up with a much lower development impact fee. And you know what? The information and the infrastructure that they're including in their CIP, or their capital improvement program, isn't the same list that the city's included in their in their existing capital improvement program, and these numbers don't tie. So, I never thought that being an auditor would be, a good help in helping our clients finance infrastructure, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. And we thought to ourselves, I bet you the home builders would be really interested in this information. So we presented that to the BIAs in Southern California, and it set us loose looking at development impact fee studies for not only the BIAs in SoCal, but Northern California. And we started doing it all around the country. And we only represent the private sector. We have no mixed loyalties. We only work for the private development community and home builders. We do not do any work with jurisdictions, but over this time, we had developed a process that we called the discovery. Get it? A little play on words there. Discovery process, where we literally go in and have this formalized process to evaluate municipalities' development impact fees, determine if they're reasonable. Since doing this, we've had a 24.6% reduction in the impact fees that we've looked at. We get involved in a lot of litigation related to this issue. It's kind of a nerdy little topic, that there's a group of us that represent the private sector if we need to get litigious, but that's part of what we do as well. As part of this whole process, I've worked with the National Association of Home Builders to update their impact fee handbook in both 2008 and 2016. And this is, an area of our practice that we continue to work in. We as a firm believe that development impact fees are a necessary evil, meaning, we're growing these communities. We have to make sure the jurisdictions and our communities have adequate, water, sewer, roadways. And it just takes a lot of money to build infrastructure. And we have to make sure that, we're being good corporate citizens and working with our public sector brothers and sisters, to build out great communities. But here again, it's a necessary evil. Where it gets a little frustrating from time to time is the jurisdictions look at this as kind of a free money, and they will make the development community increase levels of service and build infrastructure that's really not necessary to service new growth. And it becomes, it's not fair and it's not equitable, and that's where we start pushing back. But with that as a little background, what I wanted to do here today is to talk to you about impact fees in general, what they can be used for, what they can't be used for, and then get into 5 of the most common errors that we see in development impact fees. And to this end, I want to let you know that we've included in the show notes a PowerPoint. Why would you include a PowerPoint? Well, one of the things I think is really meaningful is when you can see, especially if you can see pictures of what we're talking about. I think that'll really help solidify your understanding of some of these concepts. And we've actually included pictures in the download to help you understand ideas of levels of service in particular and increasing levels of service. So I encourage you to download the show notes, follow along. We're gonna jump right into it. So development impact fees are typically charged in a lot of the high growth states. They're used to finance capital facilities. So what is a capital facility? Every state has different definitions on what a capital facility is. In some states, it's any infrastructure that's in excess of, has a useful life in excess of 3 years. Some states it's 7 years, and other states it's 10 years. But typically what we're talking about are transportation infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure, public parks, police and fire, and in some instances, it may include libraries, it may include schools, and in some instances, it may include civic buildings. But it's typically the capital infrastructure that is necessary to run a community, for people to be able to turn on taps, flush toilets, get to and from work, and have public safety. In development impact fees cannot be used for a jurisdiction to do repairs and maintenance on existing infrastructure. It can't be used to upgrade obsolete infrastructure, and it cannot be used to increase a municipality's existing level of service. And we're going to talk about that in a little greater detail because it's one of the errors that we see. So with that, let's get in and just dive right into some of the first of the 5 common development impact fee errors that we see. And the first one is mechanical accuracy. I cannot tell you how many times that we have seen that the math utilized in development impact fees is wrong. Now, sometimes when we go in and tick and tie the numbers. And here again, we tick and tie all the numbers. That means we add them all up. We tie them back to the source documents, and we go through and do all the recalculations to make sure that from a mechanical standpoint, that the math is working as intended. Especially today, where you're seeing everybody utilizing a lot of spreadsheets. A lot of these spreadsheets have been bastardized over time. New sections have been added, new rows have been added, formulas have been changed. Nobody goes back to check the formulas. They just assume that everything's working as it should. And a lot of times it's not. So the first thing to do, whether you're looking at it or you're having us look at it, is to look at the mechanical accuracy of the math that's included, because you'll see a lot of times that this math is inaccurate. The other thing that we find is that because the reports change over time and because information changes over time, that a lot of times the source documents that they're referencing, either in footnotes or as separate tables, do not tick and tie, meaning somebody has not gone back and fully referenced the report. And unless you're an accountant, that and you're very experienced in referencing work papers, this isn't a skill that a lot of consultants are familiar with, especially if you're dealing with engineers. And no disrespect to my engineering brethren, I love them, but it's a completely different skill set between being an engineer and being an accountant. So, and a lot of time, if those informational sources are wrong, then that changes all of the calculations and all of the numbers that are coming out of the development impact fee study. So the first thing to do is check the mechanical accuracy. That'll let you know if you want to go any further, because if the math is all messed up, maybe you want to go through and correct it for them, or maybe you just want to bring it to their attention and have them redo it and then get back in and begin the evaluation all over again. So the next issue that we see most common is that jurisdictions, and here again, maybe not willingly, but oftentimes include capital improvements that are meant to correct existing deficiencies. And I actually have an example of a city in the Southwest that tried to do this through a development impact fee. And let me just kind of tell you a little story. Is when we were going through the list of infrastructure that the city had included in their development impact fee that they wanted us to pay for transportation, they had approximately $107 million worth of sidewalks. And first of all, I never really see sidewalks broken out as an item in a development impact fee study. Sidewalks are included, in roadways and typically we're only paying for parkways, arterials, and maybe collector roads, in the jurisdiction. But this was a separate line item, and it was a huge number, $107 million and change. So that automatically brought up the red flag. I got on the city's website and started looking for any news that the city may have published, either in their records or in the daily newspaper that the city publishes, related to sidewalks. And oddly enough, I found within the city's records and the city council minutes that the city was no longer in compliant with the American with Disabilities Act, and that they needed to go in and build sidewalks. And the portion of the city that was built in the 60s and in the 70s and in the early 80s, when the best land use planning and all the planners said, you know what, we don't need sidewalks anymore because nobody's ever going to walk in this desert city. Everybody's going to drive their cars. So the city had a bit of a problem, and they had to, in order to continue receiving federal funding, they needed to build $107 million of sidewalks. So they just snuck this $107 million of sidewalks in their development impact fee study that new growth was going to pay for. Well, we literally went in and looked at where all these sidewalks were going to go. Sure enough, they were in areas of the city that had been built out since the 70s. And we told them, sorry, guys, you are attempting to correct an existing deficiency that is against the law, and you can't do it. So that is I think just kind of a very glaring example of a city attempting to correct an existing deficiency. But I think it illustrates what you need to be on the lookout for. And it is amazing what you can find, just by Googling existing deficiencies in the city of blank, what will come up. And then you can take that information and drill down in your development impact fee. So always be on the lookout for cities looking at the development impact fee to try to create some of the existing deficiencies within the city, or sometimes that'll be disguised as they're really repairing infrastructure. They're not adding any capacity for new growth. They're just fixing the existing infrastructure that is already in existence. So a big item. The third thing that we see, and this is kind of a double-edged sword, but it's the lack of service areas. So what is a service area? A service area is a geographic area of a city. And the reason that we like the jurisdictions to break their city into different service areas, because certain areas of a city may require more infrastructure than others. And this is why it's kind of a double-edged sword. Be careful for what you ask for, you may get it. But it also addresses one of the biggest issues we see, primarily as it relates to parks and as it relates to transportation. So what do you mean by that, Cart? Oftentimes we will see cities with one service area for transportation related impact fees. And let's assume, if you can picture in my mind, that we have a city. Let's assume it's square shape, and right through the middle of that square we have a line, and that line is a freeway. Let's call it the interstate. Interstate bifurcates our city. We have a northern half and we have a southern half. And oftentimes if I'm a home builder and I'm building in the southern part of the city, I may be paying for traffic infrastructure that's located to the north of the freeway, meaning most of my residents are never, ever probably going to use that road that's to the north of the freeway. Why? Because they live to the south of the freeway. They're going to go from the south to the freeway to their work. They're never going to go to the north. So all of a sudden, I've got my homeowners paying for streets that they're not even going to use. So what is the easiest thing for us to do is to tell the city, hey, city, we need you to break apart your transportation development impact fee to a northern section and a southern section. That way, we can be assured that the residents to the south are paying for infrastructure they're actually going to use. Now, we may go in and break that down even further. So we have a total of 4 quadrants. We may break it down into more. But that's the concept behind service areas. Now, if you're a home builder and you're saying, that they're a home builder industry association, you may be wanting the cities to break it into a lot of different service areas. And one of the concepts, that we support is fairness and equity. And if you have an area that is very expensive to build because it's, has heavy topography, it has heavy vegetation, it may have water on it, that we have to build bridges, it may cost much more for an impact fee in that area than an area that is very flat, doesn't have any vegetation, it's easy to get to. And as a result, the impact fee should be lower. Now, here again, it's strictly what is the benefit that everybody's receiving. And if all of a sudden we have a heavy impact fee in a service area that's heavily wooded, has topography, has, water, that's probably okay. Why? Because the houses are going to tend to be more expensive. And as a result of that, they can absorb the higher impact fee more so than a starter home on the flat land next to the freeway. So here again, be careful for what you ask for. You may get it. Be careful but we think it adheres to the tenets of fairness and equity. But so one of the things that we look for is lack of service areas, divvy up the land area contained within the jurisdictional boundaries, and then determine what the impact fee is for each one of those service areas, because then we can really look not only as a jurisdiction, but as the development industry saying, yes, the residents in this service area are benefiting from the roads that they're paying for. They're benefiting from the water and sewer. They're benefiting from the police and fire, and they're actually getting parks that they can use because they're in their close proximity. So error number 3 is lack of service areas. And the reason that the jurisdictions don't put in service areas is because they can collect money from for the whole boundaries of the city, and they can move it to projects that they want to move it to. And here again, as a result of that, homeowners and may be paying for infrastructure for which they receive no benefit. So what is error number 4? Error number 4 that we see a lot is that the development or the jurisdictional consultants will go through, they'll determine their impact fee necessary to build the capital improvements in the various service areas, and they ignore any other funding offsets that new growth will be paying for. So what does that mean? There's a concept in development impact fees that you shouldn't be paying for the same infrastructure twice. So a lot of times what will happen is a jurisdiction may go levy a development impact fee against new development for building a large regional roadway. But then at the same time, they'll be going out for a bond election to issue general obligation bonds. And one of the pieces of eligible infrastructure that they want to finance is that same roadway. So in other words, as me as a homeowner coming into that city, I'm paying my development impact fee, which pays for that roadway. And now the city has issued a general obligation bond, and some of that bond proceed that I'm paying for on my ad valorem property tax is being used to pay for that same road. So the city is really double dipping, getting in money for that road twice, once through the impact fee and another time through the general obligation bond. So what we have to do is make sure that all of this infrastructure that's on the list, that if the city is collecting additional revenues, either through bonds, through construction sales tax, or through other contributions, and this could also be if a developer is building that infrastructure through the community facilities district or some other kind of special purpose taxing district, that those fundings are being utilized to offset the costs that new growth is being asked to fund. So going to our example, and I'm just going to make up numbers, assuming that our collector road was a $50 million road, or arterial parkway, and the city was going to collect 25 million through their general obligation bond, that the amount of the impact fee that we should be charged would be the 50 million for the capital facilities cost of the road, less the 25 million from the GO bond equals 25 million. And that's only the portion that should be collected through the development impact fee. Otherwise, new growth would be paying for that infrastructure twice. So key thing to look for, you really have to kind of dig in and look for it. And sometimes the jurisdictional consultants will list, oh, we've got an offset for this and that. But oftentimes you have to go into the CAFRA, which is the city's comprehensive annual financial report, and you have to get into the notes of the financial statements to really understand what is being financed and where all the general fund monies are coming from and what those general fund monies are being used for. So fourth error, ignoring funding offsets. Last but not least, drum roll please, error number 5. And we see this a lot. And that is the jurisdictions will come in and they'll want us to increase their levels of service. And there's a lot of different ways that they do this. And if you go to the show notes, I've got some pictures of fire stations. And this is where we see it the most, is in the provision of fire stations. And I love the fire department. I'm glad they're there. But a lot of times the cities really take some liberties in development impact fees and the financing of fire stations. But one of the things that we'll typically use, and I'm gonna tie this back to fire stations today, is that we'll take a look at what the city wants us to construct. Oftentimes they will have renderings on their website of fire stations that they hey, we're collecting impact fees for fire station number 8. Typically cities like to talk about their fire station, so they publish renderings on their website. Hey, we're going to be building fire station number 8. And we go look and we get the renderings of fire station number 8, which is typically some modern building, LEED certified, workout facilities. I mean, great residential areas for the firemen to kind of live, work, and play. Huge amount of bays. I mean, these things are awesome. I mean, they're architecturally very cool. The problem is that when you go look at what the city has been constructing to date, usually these fire stations are brick buildings built in the 60s and 70s. They may even be steel buildings. So when you look at what the city is able to build through development impact fees, they only can ask new development to pay for the existing level of service that exists within the community today. So we'll go and we'll drive on Google Maps and we'll take pictures of all the fire stations that they've got. We'll go in and we'll show them pictures. Here's all your fire stations. Here's the one you're going to build that you would like us to pay for. We estimate going through Marshalls and Swift that the cost of a standard brick building, class C, is $100 a foot. You're showing your LEED certified building at $700 a foot. We're only going to pay $100 a foot because this is your existing level of service. And when you can show pictures, you're pretty much over in you don't have to argue too hard, because they can see that what they're asking you to build is nowhere even close to what they currently have. So go to the website, landalots.com, download the show notes, and you'll see some of the pictures that we've looked at. And another one you'll see, and this is a project in Idaho where their existing level of service was steel buildings and for their fire station. And here again, that's all they could afford. That's all what they needed. They wanted us to construct, and what they had indicated that their replacement cost for their steel building was $500 a foot, and that's what we should be paying. And we said, that's probably not going to work. And obviously we're able to bring down the fire fee to something that was much more reasonable. But that is a key thing. The other thing you'll see cities doing is that a lot of times they'll just have 2-lane roads And then all of a sudden, they're going to be constructing and collecting through development impact fees, 4-lane high-speed roads with divided medians and bike paths on either side and public art. I kid you not, public art in some of these instances. And here again, it's pretty easy to go on Google Earth and say, okay, here is what your roads look like today. And you want us to build this cross section of a roadway, which you don't have anywhere in your city. Why are we paying for this? And the cities will say, well, we're issuing general obligation bonds, and we're only asking you to pay your pro rata share of what we have today, and we're going to build this existing level of service, and we're going to issue general obligation bonds. The thing you have to be careful of when they say this is that, are they issuing, and have they been successful in getting a bond election, and did they issue their bonds? Because what I have found is that cities have often indicated they're going to pay for an existing level of service, but they don't. And then they come back with their next development impact fee 5 years later and are looking for the development community to pay for increased levels of service that really don't exist and that never existed, and that ultimately were funded through development impact fees. So I'm not pointing fingers and saying that generally. I'm just saying it's something that we see as cities look to address all of the issues that cities have to address in a growing economy. So I hope you found the 5 typical errors of development impact fees beneficial. I encourage you to go back and look at the show notes, because the pictures and some of the math will make this more understandable to you. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Tune in next week for the next episode.